Is Sarah Lawrence College about to become the next Evergreen State? It's probably too early to tell, but there are definitely some similar signs. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what happened at Evergreen State College, I did about a half a dozen videos on the ideological takeover that took place at that state-funded university back in 2017. However, rather than wade through that, you can get a better understanding over at Mike Nunez's channel with his excellent two-part series about what actually happened at Evergreen State as told by Brett Weinstein and Heather Haying. Importantly, it includes a lot of the context around the build-up of ideological intolerance on campus prior to the controversy that erupted around Brett Weinstein in 2017. The story that broke in the spring of that year was centered around Weinstein and his refusal to leave the campus on the annual day of absence. Previously, it was students and staff of colour that voluntarily left the campus. However, in 2017, they flipped the script and asked white students and faculty to make themselves absent. Weinstein refused, the outrage flowed, ultimately leading to Weinstein being forced out of Evergreen. And so do the recent activist protests at Sarah Lawrence, which have similar echoes to Weinstein's trials and tribulations at Evergreen. They centre around one professor that dared to speak up against the growing orthodoxy of left-leaning bias on campus. That professor is one Samuel Abrams, a professor of politics and social science at Sarah Lawrence College and a faculty fellow with New York University Center for Advanced Social Science Research. You see, Abrams had the audacity to write a piece for the New York Times in October last year about the ideological bent of college administrators and their outsized effect on campus culture. Abrams argues that while considerable focus has been placed in recent decades on the impact of the ideological bent of college professors, when it comes to collegiate life, living in dorms, participating in extracurricular organisations, the ever-growing ranks of administrators have the biggest influence on students and campus life across the country. Abrams became concerned about the increasing number of events being organised on campus around progressive topics such as liberation spaces, code for safe spaces, on campus, Black Lives Matter and justice for women, as well as for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, asexual and allied people. Some of the event names were Stay Healthy, Stay Woke, Microaggressions and Understanding White Privilege. And as Abrams notes, these were being offered with no meaningful ideological alternatives. This led Abrams to survey a nationally representative sample of roughly 900 student administrators that deal directly with students' campus life. And the results? Abrams found that liberal staff members outnumber their conservative counterparts by 12 to 1. Only 6% of campus administrators identified as conservative to some degree, whilst 71% classified themselves as liberal or very liberal leaning. Abrams concluded that it's no wonder so much of the non-academic programming on college campuses is politically one-sided. Furthermore, Abrams notes that the 12 to 1 ratio of liberal to conservative college administrators makes them the most left-leaning group on campus. This is in contrast to the 6 to 1 ratio of liberal to conservative professors and a less than 2 to 1 ratio of liberals to conservatives amongst incoming first-year students. Abrams concluded the article by stating, "This warped ideological distribution among college administrators should give our students and their families pause. To students who are in their first semester at school, I urge you not to accept unthinkingly what your campus administrators are telling you. Their ideological imbalance, coupled with their agenda-setting power, threatens the free and open exchange of ideas, which is precisely what we need to protect in higher education in these politically polarised times." A reasonable conclusion, you might think. Well, not so fast. A month later, Abrams penned a piece for the American Enterprise Institute with the subtitle, "I suggested that more balance was needed in academic programming. Within hours, my office door and surrounding corridor was vandalised. Pictures of my family were taken and bumper stickers that I had placed on the door to create a welcoming environment for students were stripped off. The vandals covered my door and surrounding hallway area with hateful paraphernalia intended to intimidate me into leaving the school. I received subsequent threats, and an alumna I have never met claims to be actively working on ways to ruin my life. while many others are demanding that my tenure be stripped, all because I wrote a relatively tame article with which they disagree. Following the defacement of my door, I was disappointed by the lack of a clear stand against violence and intimidation, and the lack of support for academic freedom and diversity of thought I expected from the college administrators. In fact, a note I received from a college official described the act as alleged vandalism. And so you can start to see the parallels with Evergreen, a small group of noisy, intolerant activists and an impotent administration. It took 3 weeks of Abrams and others' lobbying efforts to get the college president to issue a statement backing Abrams' right to free speech and to condemn the vandalism and threats of violence. Now fast forward to March this year, and a group of activists calling themselves the Diaspora Coalition have released a long list of demands whilst occupying the campus's main administration building.
Sarah Lawrence, what a shame! 50 years and still the same! Sarah Lawrence, what a shame! 30 years and still the same!
The list of demands is 9 pages long and covers issues such as housing accommodations on campus, food and security, resources for low-income students, support for international students, demands on the faculty, demands on the staff, funding demands, demands for Indigenous land acknowledgement, and a demand that the college respond to the students' demands with a timeline of when the demands will be met. Sounds very demanding. It would take me more time than the running time of this video to read them all out. So let's have a look at some of these demands, and not just the ones that grabbed headlines, such as a demand for more fabric softener for all campus laundries. Of course, with respect to faculty, the grievance bullies have demanded that Samuel Abrams' position at the college be put up to tenure review. And who's going to do that review? Well, the Diaspora Coalition, of course, as well as at least 3 faculty members of colour, who presumably will be chosen for their ideological conformity. Apparently 25 faculty out of about 380 have signed on to the demands in solidarity with the students. And as Heather Haying tweeted, this is exactly what happened at Evergreen State when Brett Weinstein had the temerity to appear on Fox News. In addition, the grievance mongers demanded that the college must issue a statement condemning the harm that Abrams has caused to the college community, specifically queer, black and female students, whilst apologising for its refusal to protect marginalised students wounded by his op-ed and the ignorant dialogue that followed. Abrams must issue a public apology to the broader SLC community and cease to target black people, queer people and women. Their condemnation of Abrams included the following: Abrams' derision of the Black Lives Matter, queer liberation and women's rights movements displays not only ignorance, but outright hostility towards the essential efforts to dismantle white supremacy and other systems of oppression. This threatens the safety and well-being of marginalised people within the Sarah Lawrence community by demonstrating that our lives and identities are viewed as opinions that we can have a difference in dialogue about, as if we haven't been forced to debate our very existences for our entire lives. And that again should be familiar to those that watch the Evergreen saga unfold. Exaggerated and completely fabricated claims of victimhood and implicit claims of racism and other isms without a shred of evidence proffered. And if you ask for evidence of, say, racism, well, that question itself constitutes racism. Let's hear from Brett Weinstein.
There were all of these allegations about white supremacy at Evergreen, and every so often somebody, sometimes it was me, sometimes it was somebody else, asked about, okay, where's this white supremacy? Can we see it? Can we evaluate it? And this faculty member said that, she said, to ask students who are suffering from white supremacy to tell us about the instances of white supremacy is itself racism. And she said, we must stop asking them because we are inflicting harm on them, asking for evidence. And the phrase she used, she said, to ask for evidence of racism is racism with a capital R. And as she said, racism with a capital R, she leaned forward in her seat and she looked directly at me.
Now, a personality on Twitter that goes by the name of Keiko put together a fantastic thread on the unfolding events at Sarah Lawrence, and she noted that some of the demands put forth by the students were probably illegal. For example, the college will designate housing with a minimum capacity for 30 students of colour that is not contingent on the students expending any work or labour for the college. This housing option will be permanent, an increase in space and size based on interest. The very next demand on the list was the one about laundry detergent and softener. Keiko points out that this protest follows a formula developed several years ago by the Black Liberation Collective, a multi-campus black student activist collective. Students from 80 campuses participated in protests and issuing of demands to their administrations during the 2015-2016 academic year. Sarah Lawrence students were among them. The current protest at Sarah Lawrence is a follow-up to the 2015 Blackout SLC protest and also harkens back to historical grievances from previous generations of Sarah Lawrence students who occupied Westlands in 1969 and 1989. As Keiko states, and as I have documented on this channel, both the protests at Evergreen State and Mizzou led to sharp drops in enrollment and budget cuts. Here's a much younger me from 2018. Last month it emerged that based on current figures, Evergreen is predicting a nearly 20% drop in student enrolment when the 2018-19 school year begins. That's on the back of a 5% decline in registrations from the 2017-18 year. Now, what has happened to enrolments at Evergreen is not new, of course. It is part of what is now known as the Mizzou effect. Recall that enrolments at the University of Missouri plummeted in the fall of 2016, the year after campus protests peaked. The size of the freshman class fell 23%. In 2017, the slide continued with freshman enrolments down by a further 16%, and this fall in the size of the student body combined with state budget cuts forced the school administration to cut 400 jobs, increase tuition, and shut down 7 dormitories. You may have noticed with respect to Mizzou that the biggest drop in enrolment in percentage terms was from black students, dropping 42% in 2016. So the exact demographic the protests were designed to help then shunned the university. So it will be interesting to see if the same sequence of events plays out at Sarah Lawrence. Sarah Lawrence is not a cheap place to study. The average tuition, including board and meals, comes to almost $70,000 a year, making it one of the most expensive colleges in the country. Although not all students at Sarah Lawrence are wealthy. According to this article from the Chronicle of Higher Education, 17% of students at the college receive Pell Grants. According to US Education Department data, Sarah Lawrence's share of students from families in the bottom 20% of earners is 7.5%, the fourth highest among highly selective private colleges. However, the ability of Sarah Lawrence College to continue to provide an education to students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds may be at risk if we see a repeat of the Mizzou Evergreen effect. Will the faculty and the administration show some backbone, defend open academic inquiry, viewpoint diversity, and not give in to the demands of the mob? We shall see. This will be one to watch. I'll see you next time.